Hi everyone, Andy here at Spymaster Gaming. Welcome back to the channel and a very warm welcome if it's your first time joining us. In today's video, I'm going to be conducting an interview with George from 3 Cell Studios, discussing his new game Margrave, the March of Lords, which at the time of this video's release will be on Gamefound. Now, a bit different from what I usually do, but I'm going to be asking him some questions about the game. It looks a really intriguing rank and flank system, so stick around if that's your thing. If not, I urge you to check it out because it does sound like a lot of effort has gone into this. So please consider watching the rest of the interview. Also consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'm still new to YouTube and trying to grow the channel, so anything you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. Apologies for the audio quality on my end during the interview. I was having some difficulties, but George is the main person you want to listen to anyway, and he comes through crystal clear. You'll also notice a costume change from the white to the red, which I do, and you won't even notice it, I promise. So, hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you on the next one.
So, hi George, everyone. This is George from 3 Cell Studios, creator of Margrave. Thanks for joining me on the channel for this. Really appreciate it. So, here to talk about obviously the game that's going to be launching, or by the time this video airs, will have launched.
Will have launched. If everything goes to plan, will have launched. Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking in the future. So, first off, what was your inspiration for creating your own game? What made you take the steps? I mean, it's a hell of an undertaking. I think for anyone to even consider. And from our sort of initial conversations, it sounds like you are very much a one-man operation. So what drove you to the point of saying I want to create my own game, and what got you to the state of where you're ready to launch it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Andy. It's really great. It's always nice to be to be approached, to ask to come and talk about stuff like this. And Margrave, and I'm talking about Margrave essentially incessantly at the moment. So you're another willing pair of ears. Thankfully, let me get it all off my chest. So for those people who haven't kind of come across me or come across Margrave before, my name's George. I am a now ex-academic, a lot of things to be fair, but an ex-academic. I was a content creator for the A Song of Ice and Fire tabletop miniatures game for about 2.5 years. My channel is still running. It used to be 3 Cells Gaming. It's now 3 Cell Studios. And while I was doing that, I started the channel at the tail end of my PhD. I was just getting ready to submit my PhD. In fact, I might have just submitted it. I can't quite remember now. It was that long ago. But it was right around really early on during the first wave of COVID. So we were in the first set of lockdowns, and I started the channel on a whim. I kind of bought into the game, started the channel on a bit of a whim, and it kept growing, and it was really, really great. And I became, a big fish in a small pond. And I had a really committed, lovely community grow up around me. And it was them that gave me the confidence to start doing Margrave essentially. And so I've always wanted to design games, always wanted to do it. I've been a big gamer my entire life. I started miniature wargaming when I was a kid. Money was really, really tight, so I didn't really have many options when it came to mini wargaming. And this is maybe something we could talk about later as to what I'm trying to do with Margrave and with 3 Cell Studios as a business. But I always wanted to play big army games with miniature war games and just couldn't really afford it. And so as a consequence, I found a lot of outlet for those things in strategy computer gaming. So things like the Total War series and Command and Conquer and Company of Heroes, games like that. All of these games really scratched that itch for me. And one game in particular, which is the absolute inspiration for Margrave, which no one has ever heard of. It was a PS2 launch title called Kessen, Kessen, in which no one's heard of it. No one has ever heard of it. I can't be the only one that played it, but it was by a studio called Koei, who are now Koei Tecmo, and they do like the Dynasty Warriors series and stuff.
So that I have heard of. Yeah.
Okay. So Margrave is not Dynasty Warriors. It is like Kessen. So what Kessen is you refight the Battle of Sekigahara, and it's really cinematic, and there's a lot of elements from there that stuck with me as like an 11-year-old. And I was like, one day that's the game I want to make a version of. And really that's where Margrave's inspiration came from. And I'm a big dreamer, right? I'm a big dreamer, always wanting to do new things. And the channel was going well enough that it gave me the confidence to be like, actually, you know what? Like maybe I can actually do this. And it's cost me every single penny I had. All of my savings are now gone. Like we're, at this point, the time we're recording, we're like 5 days away from the launch. I've got like 50 quid left to my name. I was working 3 jobs to make sure I could fund Margrave to get to the point where it is now. But I wasn't, to correct you slightly, I'm not a one-man band as such as I am. I'm the main person in the band and doing a lot of the jobs in the band, but I'm supported incredibly by Joel Kilpatrick, who's my business partner in 3 Sales. He's also the lead artist for Margrave and for 3 Sales Studios full stop. He's been an incredible support. He's an amazing artist. He's someone I know from up here in Manchester. He's one of my very best friends, and he does all the artwork for Margrave. And for me, that's like the really, really big thing that I can't do is artwork and that kind of, that kind of level of creativity. So I've been really well supported by him. And then Ricardo, who is our sculptor, is just, incredible. Obviously people will have seen the models by now if they haven't already. You can find them on margravethemarcherlords.com. You can find them on the Gamefound page. Just Margrave the Marcher Lords on Gamefound. Give that a search and it'll come up. I'm sure there'll be links in the video description and stuff. Ricardo has done an incredible job of, you can tell I used to be a content creator, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's old habits die hard. So both of those have been absolutely incredible. They've been unbelievable helps. And my play testers as well, obviously, like I can't thank them enough. The community that I built up around 3 Sales Gaming was my initial audience and my initial concept testers for Margrave. And then it's kind of grown bigger and the community's growing and growing. And like I said, we're now like 5 days away from launch, and the community's, my Discord community in particular, I'm so proud of them. They're such an excellent bunch of people. And I promised them I would always shout them out in whenever I'm doing a recording of any sort. They're just incredible. So yeah, that's how I kind of got started with it. Is I'm very much kind of pushed and driven by other people believing in something. When I say I want to do something and other people are like, oh, actually, yeah, that sounds great, then I'm hell for leather all the way down. And this is how we end up, 5 days away from launching a game.
I think that's excellent. I mean, anything that succeeds, it has to have a strong community behind it.
Absolutely.
If there's not the want and desire for it, then obviously, what is it apart from just another item to potentially pass by? But I think it's fascinating for you to say that it's something that stuck with you since you were 11. I mean, I'm jealous in a sense where people say when they're inspired by things, and I look at how I was as a child. I think, is anything really stuck with me from since childhood? And no.
Well, I mean, my thing with it is everyone, the direction we're all pushed in comes from everywhere, man. Like it's, that is what just one particular thing, but like so much of it comes from all over the place. If you'd asked me before I started designing Margrave, George, do you remember that title from, that game? I'd probably have remembered the title, but I'd have been like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. But then as I started designing and I started kind of remembering it, I was like, oh no, it's all coming back out now with a kind of subconscious thing coming to it. So everyone always gets these things from somewhere, right?
Yeah, I still think it's great. And how have you found it? I mean, let's say I'll retract my one-man band statement as you've corrected me. But how have you and your colleagues found it? Sort of as this initial experience. Have either of them had experience beforehand in any sort of creation, or is it the first time for all of you to sort of collectively do this?
So for me as a game designer, it's definitely the first time, right? It's, I've always written, and as an academic, I was writing as part of that and researching as part of that. And, that a lot of that has kind of come into it. Joel as an artist has been a kind of freelance artist for a good long time. He's done a lot of stuff for Games Workshop, in the kind of some of their kind of offshoot or smaller products. He's absolutely incredible. So for him, he's just doing what he's always done. He's drawing and illustrating. And what's new for him, I suppose, with Margrave is he's working with me and then Ricardo in a kind of, we're always going back and forward. Is I'll come up with a unit and then I'll talk to Joel about it and give him the lore and the story, and he'll go away and concept it. And then me and him work on that, and then it goes to Ricardo from there, and Ricardo will do one sculpt based on Joel's, like almost identical to one of Joel's drawings. And then Ricardo and I workshop 3 more for each unit, and then they go back to Joel and he does more artwork around them. And I'm making sure that the design is lining up with exactly how we've pulled things out. So it's a really, really collaborative process. And Ricardo, as far as I know, prior to starting kind of miniature sculpting, was working in character design for video games and stuff. So he was making character meshes rather than kind of sculpts. But the 3 of us, Joel and I are here in Manchester in the UK. Ricardo's out in Madrid in Spain. So all of that's done, online. But yeah, it's just been for all of us, this is the first thing like this that we've done. It's certainly the first thing like this that I've done. But yeah, so it's been really, really good. I mean, for Joel and Ricardo, they're very much their work takes so much longer and so much more intense focus than mine does. Because I'm designing, I can switch between designs. I can be like, oh well, I'm going to move from this unit to this unit, or this faction to this faction, or I'm going to do some marketing stuff, or I'm going to do a video recording or something like that. For Joel and Ricardo, because it's they're creating something out of nothing, that artwork process takes time and it takes focus, and so we are all playing our roles in very distinct ways, but each of those roles are supporting the other one, and it changes as we each do our bit. It changes and comes together into a kind of single creative process, which is, it sounds a bit pretentious, but it's really lovely.
No, I think it's excellent. I mean, you all bring obviously very diverse skill sets to the table, and to have sort of a clear but, as you say, collaborative way of looking at things, I think it's excellent, and it's nice when stuff like that works.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm very much like, once I find my people, I found my people with Joel and Ricardo. We all work really well together. I was incredibly lucky to find them both, incredibly lucky that they both kind of bought into the vision. So yeah, no, I'm really proud of both of them as well. The work they've both done is it's phenomenal, and it's far surpasses anything that I expected Margrave to look like. So I'm very, very grateful to them both.
Brilliant. So now we've talked a bit about obviously the creative processes and the inspiration behind it. Moving on to the actual sort of theme of the game itself, and starting with the name. So Margrave, the Marcher Lord. So it's a bit of a blend here from sort of the brief history understanding that I understand of it. So Margrave's a German title, I believe.
It is. So this is a weird one, and anyone who knows me finds this story hilarious because it's so not me. But I had the game idea for a good while, and I was kind of putting pen to paper a little bit and drafting some ideas out, but I didn't really want to get started until I came up with a name. And I am, and this is the really shocking bit for anyone that knows me, a massive Downton Abbey fan, and I can't account for why. Honestly, I can't. It is so not me. I'm a massive Downton Abbey fan, and one day I was watching it again. I watched that entire series through at least once a year. I don't know why. I just love it.
I have never watched an episode, so
you're missing out. You're missing out. So in that, there was the term, obviously, because it's about the British aristocracy, but also the British working class. And so there's a lot of kind of aristocratic titles getting thrown around. And one of them is Marquis. And I was like, I don't actually know what a Marquis is. And I was like, it sounds French, but I don't know what it is. So I looked it up, and it was like, oh, in the British aristocracy, or in the English aristocracy as it was, a Marquis was a border lord. They were part of a march. So we have the Welsh marches and the Northern marches and all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, that's really cool. Marcher lords. I like that. And then I started looking through the etymology of the word, and it's like, oh, well, this exists in other places as well. And it exists in Germany, where the old German title was Markgraf. The anglicization of that is Margrave. And I was like, oh, and suddenly I read that word, and all these story ideas that I've been swirling around in my head suddenly clicked together. So that's technically the game is Marcher Lord, the Marcher Lords, but that's less cool than Margrave, the Marcher Lords. But yeah, so that's where the title came from. It's a bit of a roundabout way of getting there, but it's all thanks to Downton Abbey. So
no, I think it's excellent. I like the fact that it expands on it. I mean, well, a bit of my family actually hail from the Marches originally, and we've traced the ancestry back up near Ludlow actually. So I've always found it fascinating as a concept. Just obviously lords trying to keep the peace and
Yeah, and and again,
it's-
that's really not me, but like, it's such a good. It worked for me because it's like these are like military rulers, and obviously it's a war game, so that has to be in there, and yeah, but that's where it came from. It was just a really strange thing. Like for months and months and months, I was trying to be like, what am I going to call this? And suddenly that kind of clicked into place, and that unlocked a lot of the creative process for me. Once I had that in place, I was able to start. So for us, Margrave is a place name rather than a title in the game. It's a kind of place name. So that's my kind of poetic license there. Rather than it being Marcher Lord, the Marcher Lords, it's Margrave as a place, not a title. So that's how we get around it.
Okay, then. So now that we've established that, what's Margrave like as a setting? Can you give us a bit of detail around the actual, the place, as you say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, weirdly, and this is going to sound quite contradictory. Margrave isn't the setting for the battles that are being fought in Margrave the Marcher Lords, but is the setting from which the factions come from. So Margrave is like the game is in a historically inspired fantasy setting. So what has happened is Margrave, the way you can think about Margrave is it's kind of a version of our own world. Like a lot of if you were to go there, you would recognize Earth's historical cultures. So obviously for us, we have the Eternal Conclave, who are a kind of Spanish Inquisition meets English folk horror faction. The Helicon League is like 2nd century BCE Hellenic city-states period. The Banner Clans is like early 16th century Qing dynasty China and the Manchu 8 Banners period. So you'd recognize these factions, but in this world, none of these factions have ever come into contact with each other. Something has stopped them. They have their own spaces and they've never come together. And for me, that's a convenient way of being like, I want to take factions from lots of different time points in history and have them come together and have it make sense. So it's a world in which these cultures are separated. Now, what has happened in this world of Margrave is a magical environmental cataclysm has occurred called the Gravetide. And this is linked to darkness, and each of the 3 factions has experienced it in their own ways. The one thing that all 3 of these factions have in common is the sun, which they call the world light. And the Gravetide has manifested in each of these different cultures' homelands in a different way, and essentially has had the effect of damaging or extinguishing or freezing or something to do with the world light. And all of the factions, in the same way that kind of historical cultures have always explained things through stories and explained things to the best of their current knowledge, each of the factions has its own explanation for what the Gravetide is. So for the Helicon League, for example, the sun has gone. So that means that the god of the sun has been killed. He's dead. And they have explained it and lived through the Gravetide in this way. So there's various different explanations, but essentially each of the factions has come through the Gravetide, changed, damaged, weakened, all these different things have occurred to them. But recently in the history of the world, these portals have opened. And again, each of the factions, their portals are different. For the Eternal Conclave, it's their holy relic sites have exploded into light, which they find heretical. For the Helicon League, the stars that were sent to Earth by the god of twilight have suddenly exploded into light, and you can move through them now. For the Banner Clans, their banner circles, their meeting spaces have erupted into light and have become portals through which these 3 factions now move into our actual setting, which is called the Bright Marches. So the Bright Marches is this, well, no one really knows what the Bright Marches is. I know what the Bright Marches is, but none of the factions really know what it is. And so therefore, I technically don't know what it is, and the community don't know really what it is yet. Again, the factions are explaining it to the best of their own knowledge. And I'm about to, by the time this video comes out, I'll be publishing on the Gamefound page an excellent piece of creative writing by one of our writers, Jeremy Bloom. He has written from the Banner Clan's perspective what the Bright Marches is like, and what he has written is that the land of the Bright Marches shapes itself to the people that are in it. So it comes to reflect the places that they came from, but is imbued with this power. It's a kind of mythical geography, magical geography kind of place. And so each of the factions are there for their own reasons. The landscape is shifting and changing around them. And as they come into conflict, the land itself begins to represent that conflict between them.
I really like that sort of a symbiotic relationship. No, I think that's very clever. I think you see it in a lot of other, obviously, fantasy settings where, you know, things are timeless. Nothing really changes apart from the hero's journey or something to have a world evolving to keep people on their toes. I think is a really neat little concept. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
Thank you.
So obviously battles taking place. I mean, I take it they're not immediately necessarily from a lore perspective going to be on the wrong foot, hostile towards one another. I assume something is going to trigger conflict, and
in our case, the person or the faction that's triggering conflict is the Eternal Conclave. So, you know, I when I started out, I was like, I don't really want like an evil guys faction, and then the Eternal Conclave popped into my head, and I was like, well, I guess we're doing an evil guys faction. And so the Conclave are so for the Banner clans, their journey into the Bright Marches is they each of our factions makes use of its own what we call in the rules tech powers. These unlock our tech trees, and it's different for each faction. It's the same mechanically, but their names different. So for the Banner clans, it's chi. It's the flow of energy that's often manifested in all living things, but it's particularly manifested in our case through the landscape. And it's an energy, it's a sustaining and potentially creative and destructive energy as well. For the Helicon League, it's the favor of the gods. And for the Eternal Conclave, it's dogma. So for the Banner clans, they are going into the Bright Marches because their tutelary god, Qian Lung, the Grand Dragon of Heaven, it was her that helped bring the 6 clans together back in the past. She is currently in the realm below. So you've got the realm of heaven, the realm of earth, and then the realm below. She has come down through the realms and is locked in a struggle with the deep void, which is another kind of primordial force. And as a consequence, the realm of heaven has frozen. All the stars have frozen. So the Banner clans are going in to try and access chi and understand what this new land is and if it's linked to their original home in order to try and help Qian Lung. The Helicon League, their lands were essentially destroyed by the Gravetide. They were all forced up into the mountains. They are coming in pursuit of the world light, thinking that Helios, the god of the sun, might have been reborn in this space, but also just to find a new home. They're there to put down roots. The Eternal Conclave, on the other hand, are happy that the Gravetide happened. It's linked, in their mind, it was linked to their own actions. They're this shadowy, evil cabal, religious cabal, were scheming and plotting and now are in total control over their people. They have gone into the Bright Marches to extinguish the world light once again. So they are a driving force for conflict. And that, they're also spies and saboteurs and assassins. And so that can seed conflict between the Helicon League and the Banner clans, who might otherwise have been, nicely predisposed to one another. The Conclave are there to sow discord and sow mistrust as well, and hence why the conflicts can break out.
Right. Okay. So no, I mean, it makes sense. I think I'd is it wrong that I sound I find myself being more drawn to them.
Mate, you're not the only one. A lot of people are. Everyone, it just, it doesn't make you a bad person, just a suspicious person,
No. Yeah. That's not a reflection of my personality, I promise.
I'm sure. Everyone needs an outlet somewhere, right?
Yeah. So with that, then we talk about the actual gameplay, and you've said it's sort of mass battles, as we call rank and flank, and it's basically units locked in together, moving in formation. What's the minimum sort of footprint? Because I know a lot of people kind of look at that and think, oh God, I don't have the time. That's a lot of models to paint.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and especially if you're flitting between multiple systems. But so, what is sort of the minimum footprint from a model's perspective that you'd need to sort of get up and running with a game of Margrave?
So a full-size game, obviously every game has a point system, and points are abstract unless you know what you're looking at. So our full-size games are played at 400 points. Now, if you had just infantry and no cavalry and nothing else, if you had just infantry for a full-size game, and it depends on which faction you're playing, because some are more elite than others, some have more, disposable cheaper units, you're probably looking for a full-size game, an average model count of somewhere between 65 and 90, I'd say. But that was if it was all infantry. Now, when you start adding cavalry in, like our stretch goals are cavalry, they are more expensive. They're smaller units. There's smaller amounts of models in the units. So that starts to bring the model count down. Our starter sets, which we're selling on Gamefound, we're selling starter sets and army bundles. Our starter sets come with 51 models. And that is enough to play a patrol size game. So a patrol size game is a half size. So our full size games are played on 6 foot by 4 foot tables. Our patrol level games are played on 4 foot by 4 foot tables. And you're looking between, again, if you have cavalry in, the numbers come down very quickly, but you're looking at probably 25 to 40 models for a patrol size game, again, depending on the faction, depending on the army composition. So it's like a massed battle game, but we're not talking hundreds of models here. You'd really have to push it to break 100, I think. In fact, I don't even know that it could be done, but it might be able to be done.
No, it's a nice sort of middle ground, isn't it? I think, especially when, say, some game systems where you've got a single unit that can be about 40 models in of itself, and it's still, I'm not going to mention names of systems, the ones that I'm on about, but it's nice to know that it's capped to a reasonable level to still get the feel of mass battle without.
I wanted it to look impressive without you having to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Like, in some cases we're talking nearly £1,000 to field an army, and that's absolutely not what we're trying to do here. In addition, most of our models come pre-assembled. This is something that we've resolved recently. It wasn't always going to be the case. They were always going to be single pose but multi-part. But actually, we're working with a new manufacturer now, which is really, really good for the health of the game. And actually, most of our infantry, in fact, all of our main infantry and cavalry regiments come pre-assembled. It's only the commanders and our spirits, our big pieces, that need to be assembled. And even then, they're relatively simple to put together. So you're saving huge amounts of time by not having to assemble minis. But thankfully, the material is malleable enough, like it's workable enough that you can kit bash if you want to. So yeah, you're saving huge amounts of time by not having to build, but just, it's, essentially, if you want, you get it out of the box, you build one commander and it's all ready to go. So that's another big kind of time save for us.
That's great. And as we know, I mean, obviously it was your bread and butter with your channel, with the Song of Ice and Fire. It can be done, and it does have
for sure.
I think some people will look at, say, pre-assembled and potentially be like, because they enjoy the building of it. Personally, I've never really liked the building part of. It's just a means to an end. Painting, I enjoy, but I think it's good to have it as a time saver. And if you've got the variety of the poses, which is the main thing, and you do, I think that that it's just expediting getting that army on the table quicker, which I think ultimately is a better thing than obviously being stuck with glue and getting glue everywhere. So
I mean, I agree with you. Ironically, I always loved building and I hated painting. But in this case, like, having come from the Song of Ice and Fire background and seeing what can be done with pre-assembled minis, and as you said, our poses, we have each of our units has 4 poses to start with, and we're going to be updating those poses and releasing kind of additional versions of sculpts and stuff further down the line. Like, there's a huge diversity in what we have on offer already. And it's another question for me about accessibility. Like, I was kind of talking to my community about it and asking their opinion on, I was like, they'd all signed up thinking they were going to be multi-part minis. And I was like, right, guys, I'm talking to this new manufacturer. One of the things I really pride myself on is being completely transparent with my community and talking things through and being honest and open with them, because I want that back, and you get the community that you model, in my mind. If you model toxicity, you're going to get it back. If you model openness, you're going to get it back. And so I said to them, I was like, look, this manufacturer is here. This is going to be really good for the health of the game. They're going to be pre-assembled minis. I'm not going to make the decision without your sign off. What do you think? And universally, every single one of them was like, yeah, pre-assembled minis are great. Like, I'm happy to do them. I like building. I like kit bashing, but we can do that anyway if we really want. And some people were saying, I've bought into games that are all just sat on sprues still, and I haven't ever used them. But when they come pre-assembled, I just get them out of the box. And if I want to paint them, I can. If I don't, they go straight on the table. So it's another accessibility thing for me. It makes it possible that people can just get playing within, the box arrives. You build one commander, it takes you 5 minutes. And off you go on the table, you can be playing straight away. So the accessibility thing is really, really important.
So we've talked a bit about, obviously, what it would look like in terms of getting them on the table. But from a gameplay perspective, you've mentioned the skill trees and that. And I think my main question is sort of what would differentiate this from other rank and flank games on the market at the moment. Obviously, we know A Song of Ice and Fire is out, Kings of War, and obviously the one on the horizon, which a lot of people will be looking at, is Warhammer: The Old World. Now, so, and it's not me being like negative or anything, but
no,
it's like not. It's because it's a unique concept, but how does it differentiate itself from those other rank and flank games? What's the USP, as it were? Aside from the setting, which is great, but
well, this is the thing. One of the things I've discovered is it's really difficult to sell your own setting. Like it takes a lot of commitment. People have to really buy into your own setting. Like if anything, your own setting is a hindrance because people are like, oh, I don't want to have to learn about all this stuff. The people that do, they do, and they love it, and that. But it's a hurdle to overcome. But the thing that makes Margrave different is essentially its entire design philosophy. So obviously I've had a lot of experience with A Song of Ice and Fire. I've had a lot of experience with back in the day with Warhammer Fantasy, and I imagine the Old World is not going to be too different to that. And games like Conquest broke some really interesting new ground that I like. I like some of the stuff they've done a lot, and all of these things have an influence, right? But what makes Margrave different is right from the outset, it was designed to have these strategy video gaming mechanics in. I am unaware, and if people feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm always happy to be corrected. To my knowledge, there is no game out there doing what we're doing with Margrave's mechanics. Tech trees are not a thing that exist in war games. If they do, they're over huge, long campaigns, but ours are occurring in battle. So every war game, you spend points, you allocate points, and you get units, and then you put them on the table. For us, you allocate points, you get spendable resources generated by your regiments. So that's zeal and the tech points that I talked about earlier on. The tech points are used to unlock the tech tree during battle. Your regiments carry their tech points with them. Once a round, when you activate a regiment, you can spend their tech points, access these 18 power tech trees. They're done on cards. The cards were an inspiration from A Song of Ice and Fire, seeing that games could use cards in a really effective way. That absolutely came from there. But the tech trees are unique to us. They're obviously not a unique thing. They're in video games. They always have been, but they're completely unique to my mind in war games, and especially in a single session. Zeal also use it. So you can then use Zeal for commander strategies. So each of your commanders brings 3 strategy cards. You have one in play at all times. They have a passive effect that's always in effect, and then an active effect that you can spend using Zeal to unlock, and that tends to be a single round power. Zeal is also used to promote your regiments in game. So in most games, a regiment will have a special rule, right? It's pretty standard. A regiment does one thing. And, for me, it's a case of, all right, well, that's fine. But special rules, not a problem. But if you think about, what we are doing with wargaming is we are abstracting battle, right? That's what war games are. We are abstracting battle. So what might take us an hour and a half, 2 hours to play could represent days of a battle, right? It could represent multiple hours, even multiple days. And regiments get better, right? They gain veterancy. They understand what their role is on the battlefield more. And so we have this thing called the prowess system. So every regiment, every unit in the game has 3 levels of prowess. Everyone starts at level 1. I mean, I've got our unit cards here. Sorry, I just hit the microphone. I've got our unit cards here. But for example, this card here is the Still Lake Temple monks from the Banner clans. Their prowess ability is called the Way of Falling Water. So every prowess ability has a name. It has a level trigger. So a level increase when this regiment destroys one or more stands from an engaged enemy regiment with equal to or greater stands in itself. You can pay 5 zeal and increase 1 level. So you start off the regiment, the Still Lake Temple monks. They're all about fighting against regiments bigger than them using martial arts. So they're level 1 that they start the game with. This regiment gains +1 armor when engaged with an enemy regiment with equal to or greater stands than itself. So when it's doing what it should be doing, it gets better at what it's doing. Then when it starts killing those enemies, it goes up a level. So this regiment generates 1 additional attack dice per stand. So now it's not only is it getting stronger in terms of its protection, it's getting stronger in terms of its attack output. Then it gets upgraded again. This regiment gains +1 to its order attribute. So, and again, I can't think of another game that does this. I can't think of another one that you are able to promote in game your regiments. But the thing is those spendable resources, they're not unlimited. You can't promote all of your regiments all the way up in a battle. It's just not going to happen. So you have to make sure it's tactical gameplay, strategic thinking at all times. Where do I need to spend these resources? Where do I need to allocate them? And again, that's abstractly simulating the logistics of a battle, which logistics can get really boring, but there's other ways of doing that in a much more fun and dynamic gameplay way. So in my mind, it's these things. There's other ones as well. We also have the fog of war effect in Margrave. You fight on asymmetric deployment maps, so you choose one and I choose one. You've got your objectives, I've got my objectives. So I'm trying to stop you achieving yours while achieving mine. You're trying to do the same thing. So the fog of war is there. You can change your formations in battle.
I
know this is one you like.
Well, even when you're talking about just going back to the sort of the prowess levels there, I mean, it's essentially positive morale, isn't it? When we think of morale in games, it's always morale has been negatively affected, and we start suffering like sort of attrition. The unit doesn't perform as well, and then by the end of it, if morale suffered enough, they get taken out of the game. That's what morale has historically been for a very long time. What you have done is essentially added, oh, hang on, guys, we're on a roll here. We're kicking ass. Let's not stop now. Let's keep the momentum going, and let's just get better at it. And I think that's great. I mean, it's what you'd expect people to do who are in the thrill of battle as well. You're not just going to stop halfway and be like, oh, if the blood's up and you're ready to, kill. It makes sense thematically. And with the sorry to interrupt there, but going back to the formations though, this really caught my eye because I think it's wonderful, because I say we always think of static blocks, and I know that it probably won't change in terms of them actually being blocks on the battlefield, but in terms of the formations and the effectiveness and what they're doing is going to be very different. So if you want to talk about the formations.
Absolutely. I'm kind of looking around me to see if I've got any stands to hand. If you give me 1 second.
Okay.
Where are we? Yeah, okay, here we go. We've got some. Now, my screen is blurred, so this is probably going to be quite difficult to see, but I'll see if I can get them to come up. So this, in Margrave, is an infantry stand.
Yeah.
When we go to manufacturing, they're going to look slightly different, but the shape is going to be the same. Essentially, an infantry stand, everything in Margrave is focused around the stand. All of the rules. You could technically just play a game with the stands if you wanted. Obviously, it wouldn't look as nice, and I encourage you to buy the models, but you could just play with the stands if you wanted. So every infantry stand has 4 models on it. Every cavalry stand has 2 models on it. Every stand generates, unless stated otherwise, but at base level, every stand generates 4 attack dice, and you roll defense dice based on the number of hits that are inflicted. So it simplifies the rules out. You always know how many. It's not, I've got this model, I've got 10 models, and each model has 3 attacks, buckets of dice. It's just, a stand has 4 models on it. Even if there's only 1 model left, it still generates 4 attacks. So you can arrange, for example, you can arrange those stands like this, and imagine that there were 2 below it as well. So we'd call that a 2 by 2 formation. It's 2 wide and two stands wide and 2 ranks deep. Now, that's a relatively balanced formation. In the shorthand of this is in Margrave, the wider your formation is, the more attack dice you can put out because you've got more stands in contact with your enemy. But the deeper a formation is, the more ranks it has, the more defensive it becomes, because there's people, it's dealing with impact, and there's people kind of, supporting other people in front of them. So you can change your formation by issuing an order to your regiment. If you're like, well, actually, you know what? There's no one around us right now. So our Blazing Sun Fire Lancers from the Banner clans, they're riflemen, right? And they love being in a big, long, wide formation because they're just throwing attack dice out. But if they get charged, that's it. They've got no defense dice rerolls. But if they're deeper, they might not put out quite as many dice, but if they do get charged and attacked, they're going to get to re-roll their defense dice equal to the number of stands in their second rank and beyond. So you are able, and again, this is what I'm talking about so Margrave is a game, from my perspective, from the design perspective, it is entirely focused on meaningful choices at all times. I hate it when you're playing a game and the I go, you go, like I'm going to move all of my stuff and do all of my shooting and do all of my again, we all know what games we're talking about here. And it's like, I bought, I painted this huge army and I bought it to the game and half of it's gone before I've even got to, pick up a tape measure. I hate that.
It's demoralizing.
Activations. It is. It's just, it's horrible. And what are you supposed to do to fight back from that? You're immediately at a disadvantage. So Margrave is a game. It's alternating activations. I activate one regiment, you activate one regiment. I activate, you activate, I activate, you activate, all the way through. And so there's no downtime. And when it's not your turn, you're still thinking, oh, right, well, I'm going to play, these are my tech tree powers that I'm going to unlock. And I'm going to place that here or that here. Oh, wait, no, my opponent's just done something that I wasn't expecting. Maybe I need to use this strategy instead of this strategy, or I was going to promote that regiment over there, but actually I'm going to spend some resources over here. You're always making choices. But the beauty of it for me, and this is where I think, and obviously I would say this, but it's been borne out by playtesting, is I think the elegant thing about Margrave is it never feels like you're making all these decisions. You don't get that decision fatigue. It's just natural game processing. You're processing the state of affairs on the board. You're managing your resources in your mind and on the table. And those formations are just another example of that. It's what posture do I want to be in? It's like, oh, that huge cavalry block is coming down on me. Better just stay in a really long line. That's not what's going to happen. That's not what happens in a battle. Rifles would form a square. We've all seen Sharp. I've seen Sharp way too many times. We all know that you form square when cavalry are around, right? But you reform, you put yourself into a more defensive position. Or, as you said, when your blood's up, let's get going, lads. Let's go and stick the sword in and finish them off. Let's spread ourselves out and move across. The initiative is in our favor. That's what we're going to do. So formations are just another one of the ways in which Margrave is setting itself apart. I can't think of another game where it actually matters like that. I'm probably wrong. There might be some out there, but changeable, adaptive formations, change, choice, adapt, and adaptivity. Those are the things that mark Margrave out as in my mind, as a unique game in the wargaming space.
No, I think it's excellent. I'd say, I know you said you wanted a game grounded in historical accuracy. I mean, what better way to do it than sort of capture realistic tactics? I mean, as soon as you said the whole column for defensive moving to wide, it did make me think of the Napoleonic columns.
Yeah.
As soon as you said it, so yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. My next question is sort of with regards to around the word bloat. I don't really like the word bloat. But certain systems, again, not naming those systems, but dependent on a lot of sort of gotcha moments, not really knowing your enemy's abilities just through the rules.
Yeah.
And it's just how does it sort of navigate away from that? Are you able to say, look at the force of each of the factions and realistically assess what the threat is going to be without knowing the intricacy of the rules? Can you still make effective decisions and not find yourself pinned down by something bizarre and quirky that you wouldn't have known about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really, really important thing. And again, it goes back to accessibility. Margrave's rulebook. Now, I haven't loaded it up, so I can't tell you exactly what it is. And if I do, my laptop's been really shaky at the moment. If I open something, my internet will drop out and then our call will be over. So I won't open it up. But Margrave's rulebook is I think it's less than 40 pages. And that includes a list of weapons at the end, and it includes a title page and a contents page and an introduction page and a World of Margrave page. The core rules for Margrave are really tight, and they will become tighter as we go through, as we move up towards the release date. The difference is so Margrave, for example, you don't get to choose your weapons, your units. You don't get to choose weapons. So it's not like other games where you're like, oh, this is my regiment. I have access to 5 different guns and I've got 5 models, and each model can have a different gun and rolls a different amount of dice. You don't get that in Margrave. A sword is a sword is a sword. A pike is a pike, a rifle is a rifle, and a regiment can only ever have one of them, maybe 2 of them, but they're not interchangeable. You guys. So, for example, our Cleansing Flame Inquisitors have swords and a crossbow, but almost everyone else has just one weapon or a weapon and a shield. You don't have to know all of your own faction's weapons and every other faction's weapons as well, because your weapons are the same as their weapons. They work in the same way. And one of the ways I came towards this is obviously, Margrave is not historically accurate in the sense that, you can summon a massive rotting angel onto the battlefield. Not necessarily historically accurate, but the idea is that a human being is basically a human being and has, broadly speaking, the same physical capacity as any other human being. What differentiates people is their training and their professionalism. So all stands roll 4 dice, except for some regiments that get better at it. But at base, they all roll 4 dice. So they get better as to represent their professionalism. Equally, because we don't have we have army lists that are available online, but like anyone can access them. They're free. All of our rules, all of our cards, everything is always free and will always be forever.
Yeah.
Downloadable whenever we update stuff. You can just print and play the cards. You can slot them into the cards that we will give you in the boxes, but you can update them whenever you want. But equally, the cards are always on the battlefield. So if you want to look at your opponent's cards, just say, can I look at your cards? And if not, you can print them for free online. And there aren't that many of them. Like currently each faction has 3 commanders and 6 units available to them. The cards, I mean, these are like tarot size cards. They've got some information on the front, but then they've got rules reminder text on the back. So it tells you what the weapons do. It tells you what their special abilities do. It tells you what their leaders do. The gotcha comes from clever tactical gameplay. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but not, this is one of 50 different faction variants, and I didn't realize that they could do that because I haven't read all 10 books that come with this. Like, it's a case of, if you want to learn this stuff, you can learn it. It's simple to learn, it's easy to pick up, and it's free. You don't have to pay to learn other people's armies. And so the gotcha stuff comes from where real battle gotcha stuff comes from, which is, I've outplayed you. Like, you weren't expecting. I've laid a trap. You've walked into my trap exactly as planned. Twizzle my moustache. That's where the gotcha comes from. But you don't always have to fall into that, because you adapt. If your opponent is trying to draw you into something, they're probably trying to draw you into it for a reason. And so, again, you are empowered. Margrave empowers you through choice. The game is entirely in your hands, because your opponent's going to be trying to play their objectives. You're trying to play yours. You could ignore them and run, or you could ignore them, ignore their objectives, and just play your own. Or me and my friend David, one of our play testers, recorded a battle report the other day, and I played his deployment map. I stopped playing my own one. I just played his instead. And he was like, what are you doing? Why aren't you trying to score? And I was like, because I'm outscoring you by killing your units and stopping you from doing your stuff. And he's like, oh my God. So Margrave empowers you. The gotcha comes from clever, astute gameplay rather than gimmicks and tricks and hidden information.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's all of my questions. So it's on Gamefound now, as you said.
Yes.
I've put at the time of this launches, I've put the links in the description below. I just want to say thanks very much for your time. I think it's been very insightful, and hopefully for those of you watching, you'll give it a look and give it your backing as well. I think you've got a truly unique concept here, and I wish you all the best for it. And yeah, I'll be keeping my eye on it, and can't wait to. Hopefully, I'll be able to do some play testing nearer to when it actually comes out fully.
You'd be more than welcome, Andy. Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for having me, mate. It's been a pleasure talking to you about it. And I'm always, one of my things, I'm always happy to support content creators. As a content creator, I know the value of content creation. I know the value that content creators have to their own communities, to our community. So thank you so much for reaching out and asking to do it. I'm always happy to come back and talk about stuff whenever you want me.
Not a problem. Thanks very much, mate. Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.